Knuckleheads, welcome to Andrew Tate versus Chase Demoor post-fight show live at the FightersRep. I'm your host of FightersRep, Fez. I apologize being a little bit late on this one. Had a couple things go on today that kind of kept me back. But I did want to talk about this fight with Andrew Tate versus Chase Demoor, right? And I was kind of interested. Typically I'm not big on these misfit fights. But I was kind of interested in seeing what would happen here with Top G, a.k.a. King Cobra, a.k.a. Andrew Tate. He's such a big personality, such a big, YouTube star. Everybody knows about him or whatever it is. And I never, I know he comes from a kickboxing background, but I had never really watched him fight, to be honest. And I was interested to see how he would do in a boxing match against a guy younger than him, right? 39 years old is Andrew Tate, still in good shape. Chase Demoor, not the best fighter, but still the Misfits champion. And, I wasn't sure how competitive this would be. Actually going into it, I thought maybe Andrew Tate would do a better job, if I'm being honest. And I did think, when I go to duel.com, whatever that is, I see Andrew Tate's face. So I was wondering, is this some sort of business that he's running and he's trying to put it out there by taking this fight? Is that the whole purpose of this thing? I wasn't sure, but I was excited to see what Andrew Tate would look like in a boxing ring. And I will say, I thought it was a little bit underwhelming. I thought the fight was very sloppy. I watched a lot of the Misfits card, and I did think a lot of the fights were sloppy. Obviously, a lot of these guys are not real boxers. And even the fight with Amado Vargas versus Dean the Great, I thought was very, very sloppy and physical. And this fight between Andrew Tate and Chase Demoor was very similar in my opinion, right? Very sloppy, very physical. They're just coming forward. They said, Chase Demoor was a lineman as a college football player. You could tell, he just walked forward, pushed Tate forward, throw some smothered punches in there. Tate, obviously a kickboxer, wasn't putting his hands up there as high as he should, right? He had them down here. And that's not really going to work that well for boxing. By the way, shout out to Watson1776 for being in here. But that's not really going to work out that well for boxing. And so Andrew Tate went in there. I thought he gave a pretty good account of himself, for the first 3 or 4 rounds. He kept it pretty close. But then his age really started to show, I think, near the end of the fight. And Chase Demoor's strategy of just kind of weighing on him and pushing forward and smothering him and hitting him with punches, it really started to weigh on the Top G, right? And that's kind of what happened in this fight. I think the Top G just sort of fatigued to the point where he just couldn't hang with the young lion, Chase Demoor. You know what I mean? The GOAT. I don't know what he's the GOAT of, but I guess he's the GOAT of misfit boxing. I don't know, but that's his nickname, the GOAT, so take it or leave it. All in all, I was a bit underwhelmed. Again, it's exciting to see Andrew Tate actually fight, and, he did a decent job, but this is a young man's sport, and this was proof that it's a young man's sport, and, he just didn't look that great as the fight progressed. He just kept getting more and more fatigued. Demoor just kept putting more and more pressure on him, and, I think got the pretty fair majority decision. It was a fair majority decision in favor of Chase Demoor. Watson1776 says he didn't get knocked down, hasn't fought in 10 years, is already a 4-time world champion. If Chase was as good as they claim, he wouldn't have clinched him the entire match and only powered up in round 5. I appreciate that, Watson. Sounds like you're big on Top G. Yes, he hasn't fought for a long time, but, you also have to understand he's a kickboxer, right? And, as somebody who promoted kickboxing for 7 years, I'm talking about myself, It's a different stance. It's a different style. Everything about boxing and kickboxing, there's some similarities, obviously, but it's different, right? And I think, that's part of the reason Andrew Tate was having some trouble here. I actually thought, if anything, he would have done a bit better in the clinch, but you're talking about a young former football player. So I think that was kind of the big issue that Andrew Tate ran into, because, even in the typical kickboxing rule set, you are allowed to clinch, usually land about one knee if we're talking about like the ISK rule set, or maybe you could throw knees for 3 to 5 seconds and strike in the clinch, and then you have to be separated. Regardless, though, you are versed in the clinch ever so slightly if you're a kickboxer. And I would have just, I just expected a bit more from Andrew Tate. But, again, 39 years old, got all kinds of stuff going on outside of boxing. Obviously not 100% dedicated to this sport, and still put up a pretty good fight against a much younger man, right? But lost, and rightfully lost. And I'm sure it's going to hurt his ego a bit. When you're the top G, you don't want to lose. So, I wonder how his fans are going to react. I wonder how he's going to react. I look forward to hearing what he has to say about this fight. But me personally, I was entertained watching him compete. And like I said, I was really entertained watching Amado Vargas fight Dean the Great, although it was just as sloppy. It was very sloppy. Now, if it's your first time tuning into the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Join the channel to help me continue to grow, or get your Fighters Rep merchandise below. And feel free to drop a super chat. It'll be greatly appreciated. And again, just so you know, this is the Fighters Rep, where you get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God, in the sport of boxing, from the mind of an attorney/promoter. We go live after all the big fights. We went live yesterday after the Jake Paul fight, and we're going live today after the Andrew Tate fight. Not a massive fight, but a fight that was intriguing, a fight that was interesting, a fight that, made me want to tune in and see what this guy looked like, right? What is Andrew Tate going to look like in a boxing ring? And, it wasn't a total disappointment, you know what I mean? But it was a little bit underwhelming, and, when you get these like social media and celebrity fighters in there, even when it's against real fighters like Amado Vargas, or Amado Vargas, it just makes for a sloppy fight. Watson 1776 says he said he has no excuses, and gave a hats off respect to Chase, and Chase cried after winning, saying Tate saved him from suicide. Wow. Wow, that is really, really interesting and very cool, and I appreciate you pointing that out, Watson. I was actually a bit pressed for time today, dealing with some other situations, and I watched the fight and I jumped right on here. I didn't get to watch the post fight. I'm going to go check that out, but that's very interesting and a very cool thing to hear after the fact. And look, it was a close fight. I mean, I thought it was a close fight. I was hearing that, Tate lost the fight, but, as I was watching the fight, I thought it was really close through 3-4 rounds. But then in the 5th round, I just felt like, the younger man started to pull ahead, as you would expect in a combat sport. For me, I felt like the most entertaining fight of the evening was the one between Amado Vargas, even though, again, it was very sloppy. But, there was a lot of bad blood between Vargas and Dean the Great, and I just kind of wanted to see what happened there. And it was crazy to me. I don't know if you guys saw it. Vargas was actually like yelling at Dean the Great and cussing him out and saying bad stuff about him after the fight. I mean, so it looks like even beating the guy wasn't enough to kind of squash the beef there. Very interesting stuff. But besides that, I don't want to give too much attention to Misfits Boxing. It's not really my thing. But again, Andrew Tate, man, that's a big name. So I wanted to kind of go live immediately after that fight, give you guys my thoughts about it, and see what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think in the chat or in the comment section below. about Andrew Tate? Do you want to see him back in there again? Did you think the right guy got the majority decision in Chase Demoor? Did you think Andrew Tate did enough to win? I thought the rightful guy won. I thought, Demoor did a pretty good job using his advantages, which are, basically his size, his youth, and his football career. And I thought it was, a pretty cool event overall, but a bit sloppy and underwhelming. Let me know what you guys think. I look forward to hear what you guys have to say. Also, I am going to be dropping content pretty much on the daily, so please subscribe. We talk about boxing here for the most part, but we'll touch on all kinds of sports, but mostly boxing. So I appreciate you guys joining. Subscribe to Knucklehead Nation. I'll see you guys soon.